Hey everyone, welcome to the Mr. Teacher, Mr. Preacher podcast and YouTube channel. This is Kevin, I'm the teacher. That's Jake, he is the preacher. And we are on a mission. Look at that wave. We are on a mission to learn what lasts in athletics and then share it back with you, what we've learned, the athlete, the coach, the parent, so we can get a little bit better than we were yesterday. Because when you're through learning, you are through. We are in an episode, our first episode of the third pillar of John Wooden's Pyramid of Success, friendship. Before we dive into that and before we dive into our book, I got to tell you where you can get the book or all the books. And that is at bookshop.org. We are studying The Good Life, which is a study on the longest longitudinal study ever. But this is by Robert Waldinger and Mark Scholes. Lessons from the world's longest scientific study of happiness, and bookshop.org is one place you can go get that. They're the underdogs, as I like to say, of the book selling world because they support independent bookstores all throughout the nation. So it's a good spot. You can support the channel, you can support independent bookstores. That's a win-win. We like that. That said, get the book wherever you can, wherever books are sold. And you can join us in our deep reads as we continue to learn about Wooden, his pyramid, and other topics as we get to them. So bookshop.org, go get it, and let's go. So before we really start, I do want to just give everybody the map. So I haven't done this. I have it. I really want to give you the Wooden map. So I'm going to share my screen if you are watching on YouTube. If you're on the podcast, just know I'll verbalize this for you. So you can go from there. So, Jake, can you see the pyramid?
Yes, I can.
Yes, you can. So 75 years ago, as of this recording, John Wooden officially solidified his pyramid of success, which was these attributes or traits that allowed somebody to be successful in his definition, which was that self-satisfaction of knowing you made the effort to become the best of which you are capable. Now, it's been a hot minute since this has been done. He has since passed, and he retired long ago in the 70s. And so, we're looking at what lasts in athletics, and we won't be with Wooden forever. This is a series. But we thought, let's take each of these themes one at a time and read good books, read good material, and see what do we learn since then? We have learned from Wooden and validated it from there. So we've already covered the cornerstones. That's in the bottom left and bottom right. So imagine a pyramid. There's 5 sections on bottom and 4, 3, 2, 1. We've covered industriousness, working hard, working smart, and enthusiasm, having energy and enjoyment with what you do. And now we're going to finish this bottom layer. So this middle section of the foundation, and that is friendship, which means, I'll zoom in, to strive, and I quote, to build a team filled with camaraderie and respect. Comrades in arms. And that's where we're headed. So it's been really fun so far. I'm really biased, obviously, but the books have been great, and the protocols and learnings have been phenomenal as well. So Jake, let's jump into friendship. Let's focus our listeners in with. I'm gonna tease ahead a little bit because I know it's coming, but I want to start with gifts. So of all people, kind of like Abraham Lincoln, we have Ralph Waldo Emerson. So this is in chapter 5, if you got the book, Attention to Relationships, Your Best Investment. And the quote to start the book, or that chapter, excuse me, is the only gift is a portion of thyself. Good quote. First off, go Emerson. So Jake, what I want to ask you, and as a listener, listen in, what gift do you give your team? Now, it doesn't matter what context you are. You're the parent, you're the coach, you're the athlete. As a friend, like let's just say in a sports context, what gift did you provide for your team? I know you're a captain, a leader. What gift did you offer the team, the portion of thyself?
I would say first, peace or calmness, steadiness, humor, and let's say an example of hard work.
I like it. Now, This is going to be interesting because later in the episode, we're going to talk about what type of support or the keystone you provide your team, and also the 5-word challenge at the very end. And so I heard peace. So you're cold-blooded. I agree with that. You're awfully stoic. I appreciate that. But you balance that out with a little bit of humor. So you're able to keep things light. And I think the word you said that I resonate with the most is example of hard work. Like, what does it look like to do the thing? And that is very, very useful. So if you are listening, think of that. Like everybody, as Shakespeare said, plays a role on the team, and we play many parts, and sometimes those roles change. But as we talked about with industriousness enthusiasm, being your most authentic self, and when you have peace, humor, and hard work, you can provide that energy, and other people can provide other things. I like it. It's a good start. We'll keep that simple. So this book is our first book of friendship. And the reason why we picked this one is that I love a good white paper or longitudinal study. All right. Like where they summarize other studies, like a meta-analysis, and they distill all the findings for you. It's like, yes. And they save you all sorts of time. And I got to tell you, if you are a reader or if you're trying to learn, this is the longitudinal study. Okay. And they even have a mic drop for you. So lessons from the world's longest scientific study of happiness. So let's go into our first draft reading. So comprehension. What is this book about? And then let's go over some puzzle the preacher facts. But let's start at the beginning. The premise of this book, this is so entertaining. I'm going to read a couple sections to you at the beginning. They asked, what if we could study people from the time that they were teenagers all the way into old age to see what really matters to a person's health and happiness and which investments paid off? And they said, we did that. Now, they didn't just do it for like a decade or two. We're talking 84 years of writing this book. So it was called the Grant Study. It originated in 2 separate studies, the Harvard Study of Adult Development. Multiple directors have gone through, very famous. They had 268 sophomores at Harvard College and 456 inner city Boston boys. So we're talking a very good sample size, obviously a certain demographic, and they address that, throughout the book, which we don't need to get into. But the point of this is like, what do we see? What do we know? And I'm going to kind of give it away, is that good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. And this is what they learned. They learned what matters and what does not matter. Now, the aim of the study, which included JFK, by the way, Jake. JFK was in this study until he became a president. Yeah, that is cool. The aim of this book is to offer what we have learned about the human condition, to show you what the Harvard study has to say about the universal experience of being alive. Okay. And they asked some more questions, which are useful. And we're going to cover these, we'll answer them as we go within our context of athletics. Why do relationships, this is a good question, seem to be the key to a flourishing life? What factors in early childhood shape physical and mental health in mid and late life? What factors are the most strongly associated with longer lifespans or with healthy relationships, in short? Pretty neat to see that those questions are answered and we can literally steal from them. They do cite other longitudinal studies, so they didn't just do their own. There were 7 other ones that they allude to. And that's just really good to see. So they've done their homework. They know what to do. And the point is that of all these longitudinal studies and about relationships and friendship, they show that people, and I quote, who are more connected to family, to friends, to community, I would say your teammates, your team, your coach, are happier and physically healthier than people who are less connected. That is the premise of the book. It's kind of a mic drop. Like, hey, we got 84 years of like backing here. And that's where we're going. So, Jake, let's play our game. This is our newest segment on the first draft reading, as we're looking at comprehension level. And we're going to play a game called Puzzle the Preacher. So I'm going to give Jake comprehension level questions, meaning they're just a type of question. True, false, multiple choice, maybe fill in the blank if I'm feeling a little bit frisky. And you can play along, like see if you can get them right. See if you can puzzle the preacher, beat the preacher. Or I'd like the other one was rattle the reverend if we're going to be alliterative. That was good. That was pretty. That was a good one. So I got about 10 here, and we'll go quick. And this allows us to really get you some of the bigger facts, kind of like we did with Super Better. So Jake, from a number 1 to 10, this is the first one. 1 in how many people are considered lonely in America?
Meaning like out of 10 people, how many are lonely?
Yeah, 1 in.
Okay. Every 1 in X amount of people are lonely is what you're asking me. Okay.
Yes.
Every 1 in 8 people.
It is 1 in 4, good sir.
Jeez.
1 in 4 are lonely. More than 60 million people, which was a lot easier of a guess than 60 million. So next,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. I don't want to completely I gotta at least have you get some right. So some of them are going to be lob balls, but I think you can hit them. Number 2 is for Puzzle the Preacher is true or false. The UK has a loneliness minister.
I'm going to say true, and I'm going to say it's the loneliest person in the UK.
That is true. So, yep, there is a minister of loneliness because of how bad loneliness has gotten across the way. So you did get that one right.
Have you looked into that human being? Have they tried to push forward any policy or anything like that?
Other than what was in the book, they made much more of the case of the health detriments of loneliness, which I have some more questions on that. I did not go ahead and look up the minister of loneliness, but I am amused by. Well, I'm quite saddened. I don't want to bring humor into that, but yes, it's a thing.
Wow.
All right, next one, number 3. This is true or false. The number of people you know does not necessarily determine your experience of connectedness or loneliness. True or false?
True.
That is true. So some people think just because you're surrounded by people or in relationships, so you can be in a committed relationship or around a lot of people, you could still be very, very lonely. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about what that means with the Swiss cheese of having holes in different things. So well played. You got 2 in a row, Jake. This is good. We're on a roll. Let's end that and move to the next one. And let's talk about social connection. Okay. So I'm kind of throwing you for a loop here, but it's okay. So strong social connections were associated with increased odds of living longer. So social connection increased the likelihood of surviving. Okay. So you're connected. You can make it through this next year. In any given year, by what percent? Now, I'm going to make it easier for you because that's really not fair to pick from 1 to 100. Okay? So I'm going to give you ranges. So the 4 ranges are just by quarters. So Is it 1 to 25, 26 to 50, 51 to 75, or 76 to 100? So which range, what percent increased likelihood of surviving if you have good social connection? Which range would you pick?
I'd pick quarter 3, so 51 to 75.
You are so close. It was right below that. It is 50%. It was 50% I'll give it to you. It says by more than 50%. It just says the number 50. So technically, you are right. Okay, I'll give it to you. All right.
Okay.
I should have read it more closely. All right, next study. This one blew my mind. Okay, so this researcher, this is about social fitness and keeping relationships in good shape. That's what social fitness is. But it's a researcher named Janice Kleicolt Glazer. Forgive me if I don't get that first one right. So she investigated psychological stress, especially for caregivers, right? the stress affected the immune system. Okay, so if you are under relational stress, she wanted to figure out how it affected other body processes. This is interesting. So if you're an athlete, you're a coach, and you're like, oh, this doesn't impact me. Well, you have to recover from your sports. So if you don't think this stuff matters to your recovery, we talk all about sleep, hydration, all the positive psych basics, but relationships might be up there. So I want you to hear this. So she looked at how physical wounds heal. So she looked at primary caregivers for loved ones with dementia. My mom is one of those. And then people who are not caregivers. And the study like gave people a wound. It was called a punch biopsy. That just sounds cool. Probably doesn't feel cool.
We want to study you. Let us wound you.
Correct. And so they gave him this kind of like just wound, non-threatening, obviously. And they
wound.
Yeah, it's okay. They were able to measure the psychological stress of caring for a loved one, or this stress within a relationship, like a burden. Okay.
Sure.
So the number of days. Okay. So obviously the non-caregivers healed quicker. Okay. So between 1 and 10, how many days longer did it take these caregivers to heal compared to the non? 1 to 10.
4.
9.
Jeez.
9 days longer. I'll read it. It says the psychological stress of caring for a loved one, which emerged from the slow erasure of important relationships in their lives, was literally and physically preventing their bodies from healing.
Wow. That's insane.
It is massively insane. So if you are thinking that your relationships don't matter for your recovery, you would be sorely mistaken if we were able to transfer that idea over to athletics. But I thought that was really interesting.
Super interesting.
All right, Jake. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 times. Okay, is your goal. How many times more unhealthy is loneliness compared to obesity for older people? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times more unhealthy
for older people.
Yep.
4 times.
It's twice as unhealthy as obesity. Now I want people to hear this. We're in a very, I don't know, like we're very aware of our body image. Like there's this cult of body image, both good and bad in our world. And you would think that like, oh, if I want to live longer, I should take care of my nutrition. And you know what? As long as you eat with moderation, like, and I'm not going to get into the nutritional fight with people. You can take that somewhere else. This is not that channel. Go to another channel. This is the only time I'm going to tell you to go somewhere else for that kind of content. But you're actually better off investing in your relationships is the point. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go to another number with that. And go to chronic loneliness. So by what percent, same percentages, okay? 1 to 25, 26 to 50, same thing. Increases. So chronic loneliness increases a person's odds of death in any given year by what percent?
Second quarter, so 26 to 50.
That is correct. It is exactly 26%. So if you're lonelier, you're going to experience more mental health problems, engage in risky physical health behaviors. So meaning your defenses are down, right? Like, and you just need to cope, and you're lonely, and you use more negative strategies to cope with stress. So you're going to basically numb yourself with whatever numbing thing you need. So know that that's a big deal. Okay? So good. Hey, well played. Way to come back. Next one, number 7 or number 8, excuse me. This one's tough. How am I going to get you to get this one? All right. We're looking for the loneliest age range of people. Okay. I'll just give you 3 options or 4. Let's do 4. Are we going to go adolescents, young adults, or older adults, or all the above? So what is the loneliest group studied of 55,000 respondents across the world? Adolescents, young adults, and I'm using adults like 18. Well, no, I'm not going to say 18. I'm kind of giving it away. Young adults, like between, like, let's just say our age, 30s to 40s, and then like older adults, let's go like seniors, 40s, 50s above.
Be revealing my age on the podcast. That's sensitive information.
Yeah. Except the guy that has way less gray hair than I do. Okay.
Yeah, but losing it faster. At least you got hair. It's got to be one of the younger two because you said, well, I'm giving it away. So I'm going to say the young adults.
The young adults, so ages 16 to 24, 40% of whom were reporting feeling lonely often or very often. That is so interesting to hear.
I mean, a large portion of those people are in high school and college.
But we already debunked that. Like, you can be surrounded by people and still be lonely.
Well, I get that, but like the social aspect is such a large part of their life. That is surprising to me. I understand you can still be lonely around people. I get that.
Now, we've already talked about this in the comfort crisis episode, Deep Read. Okay, it is about, and we're going to cover this in a bit, the quality and the frequency. So true or false, Jake? I mean, this is not a part of the game. Are they having quality interactions and frequent interactions as defined by lack of device in person? I would say that the interactions are much different than they were. I would say they're artificial. And that would be my case. And they do make the case for technology. And you hear Catherine Price from our Power of Fun episode, who wrote about how to break up with your smartphone or how to break up with your phone. And so there's a lot of numbers around how much time people are engaging on social media and their phones. And that's taking place of what used to happen. Hey, I'm bored. Hey, Jake, you want to be bored with me? You know what I mean? Like that's
you're telling me doing keg stands with people and drinking with them until you pass out and can't remember the night isn't quality time?
I think that's an implied answer. I don't want to take the bait on that. I wouldn't say that's the majority of the connections people are making, if that is even a connection, because that feels like much like a disconnection. We do not promote hazing on this channel.
It's just college parties, no hazing. Yeah. It's just it happens at these big campuses. So I'm curious. It's just amazing to me that there is such a talk about the social atmosphere of colleges. For them to be the loneliest people is startling. Just add it to another add to the list of things that we need to reassess in our education system, huh?
Correct. And I think as a coach, like when you think of all the jobs we have or do have, and there's many. I mean, it's so many things to think about and do well. But I mean, based on this study in this book, you do well to foster that, like what it really looks like, in creating the context for, because as we're going to see, that's the things that last is your relationships. So coming up with routines and ways to build that frequency and the quality within your structure. And what does that mean? What does it look like? It's like feeding your kids vegetables, right? You know it's good for them, and you need to take a stand for it, because who else is going to, right? So and because sports are one of the unifying factors we have. And so if you can create those bonds, especially during those teenage years where the first, according to the art of making memories and others, are so visceral to them, right? These are the things that really do stick for a long time. And if you don't even know this or don't pay attention to it, you're missing a massive opportunity. You may win the championship, you may, get them better, but so what, right? All right, next one. We're going to keep rocking. We only have a couple more. How many billion, Jake? Lonely people are less productive and more prone to employee turnover. How many billion annually are we losing in the economic cost? I'll use round numbers here. 1, 2, 3, or 4 billion annually. due to loneliness?
2.4 billion.
It was a really good guess. In the UK, it would have been 2.5, but so I'll give it to you. But in the States, that is 3.4 billion economic cost of loneliness. In the United States in 2018, a study suggested how many out of 4 adults felt moderate to high levels of loneliness. 1 out of 4, 2 out of 4, 3 out of 4, no, 4 out of 4.
Wait, repeat the question.
So out of 4, how many out of 4, 1 out of 4, 2 out of 4, 3 out of 4 adults felt moderate to high levels of loneliness?
Is this different from the first question?
It was just another study. Yeah,
1
but I
out
think
of 4.
it's specific to the US.
Okay. 1 out of 4.
It's 3 out of 4.
Good night.
And this was 2018. This was pre-pandemic. Imagine what happened after that. So like that's why I want to bring that one up. Is like that was before we had major issues with connection. Now we're kind of going the whip snap or neck turn. All right, next one is equally amazing. All right, what is it closest to? So I'm going to give you some numbers because it's kind of a specific number. In 2020, it was estimated how many deaths could be attributed to causes stemming from social isolation. So is it closest to 100,000, 150,000, 200,000, or 250,000?
150.
That is correct. It was 162,000 deaths could be attributed to causes stemming from social isolation. Unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
Let's finish this up and go to, there's a couple right next to each other. So they kind of came in bunches, which is fun. I'm going to pick just one of these. I just want to see which one I want.
So at the same time that we were finding out that 162,000 people died because of loneliness, we forced people to isolate and be lonely.
Probably didn't help.
No, I can't imagine that would have aided that.
All right, now I'm going to read 2 of these and then I'll give you one more just for time's sake. So a large longitudinal study in Australia found that people over 70, so if you have grandparents in your life or just older adults you care about, with the strongest network of friends were 22% less likely to die during the study period, which was 10 years, so 70 up to 80, than those with the weakest network of friends. I'll read the other one. A longitudinal study of over 17,000 men and women between the ages of 29 and 74 in Sweden found that stronger social connections decreased the risk of dying from all causes by almost a fourth over a period of 6 years. Wow. So like very real things. Now, I want to ask this one. So they did a longitudinal study of 2,835 nurses with breast cancer, okay? And found that women who had how many friends, I'm going to give you a range, it's easier. How many friends do you need to be 4 times, Jake, more likely to survive than women who had no close friends?
Oh boy.
This is really interesting. So I'll give you a couple numbers. So let's go 1 to 4, 5 to 9 friends, 10 to 14, or 15 plus. 1 to 4, 5 to 9, or 10 to 14, or 15 plus.
5 to 9.
It was 10 or more.
Wow.
So what size? Because everybody talks about like how many friends do you need, introvert, extrovert scale, which does not matter for the record. I was going to use that as a true false. But introversion to extroversion does not matter. I mean, you still need a good, decent sized network of people that you rely on. So those are some of the facts about, I mean, it's a lot easier and the book makes a great case across the board for things. But those were some of the more poignant facts about relationships and friendship and why they matter over the long term. Sweet. So let's jump into our actual meaty part of this. So the second draft, like when we look at a book, it says, what does it say? What does it mean? And what does it matter? Like what lasts about friendship, this key term that we're looking at in athletics. And the first one I want to talk about, Jake, is the fourth R. So we have reading, writing, and arithmetic. And both authors think that relationships should be at the forefront next to those things. So back in the beginning of the book, they make this case and saying that relationships are, and I'm giving away our metaphor simile of later, are the engine of the good life. You know, we talked about enthusiasm being a good engine, but relationships are just as essential as stepping stones to other things, and they are not simply a functional route to health and happiness. They are the ends in of themselves. So meaning that there's no other benefit other than just, yes, they are very, very good for you. They go on a couple pages later. And they have an exercise, which I want to run with you. But I want to make one more point to this, where they actually mention this. There is that we do have to teach. You don't necessarily need writing or reading or science for your fundamental survival, right? Like, I mean, if you think decades, like hundreds of years past, none of that matter. But relationships and social connections and tribes did. Mm-hmm. So it gets more to the core of who we are. Mm-hmm. And super interesting. But I want to play this game with you, because this picture in the fourth hour, and I'll get you your thoughts, was this exercise. So I'll put this in the notes, but they started a nonprofit, both authors, and they said you can conduct your own mini Harvard study. And you can do this for yourself, or you could do this for another person, but they have this really powerful exercise that I think is valuable for the relationship to yourself or relationship to somebody else. So if you're a current athlete, you can do you at a younger age, or maybe a teammate. If you're a coach, you can go back to your own playing days, like when you're a younger coach, or maybe when you're a player. And if you're a parent, you could do your kids when maybe they were younger. You have those little, like, remember those embarrassing like player photos that you see? Mm-hmm. They're always on buttons.
Yep.
Yeah. And you always poke yourself with those, but I was always embarrassed that parents wore those. But I want you to run through this and think about it, and you can give me your reaction, Jake, about relationships. It says, find a photograph of yourself when you were about half as old as you are now. Okay, so I would have been 16 and a half. It was like sophomore year. Okay, going into Legion season, baseball season. If you're under 35, go back to a time you were starting adult life. There you go. Really, any photo from when you were younger, a lot younger, will do. Don't just imagine that time. Try to find an actual photo. This is key. And now, obviously, we don't have a photo in front of us, but if you run this, see if you can find one. It gives you the living reality of the photograph, the details of time and place, the expression on your face. But here's the exercise. I'm going to read it quickly. And Jake, give me your thoughts. Now, take a close look at yourself or your teammate or your child or whoever it is in that photograph. After you stop wondering why you were so into brown clothes, or marveling at your weight or your once luxurious non-thinning hair, try to place yourself back in the moment when the picture was taken. Really look at that person. Spend several minutes just taking it in and remembering that area of your life or that person's life. What were you thinking about back then? What were you worried about? What were you hopeful about? What plans did you have? Who are you spending time with? What was most important to you? And perhaps the most difficult question to face, when you think of yourself at that time, what do you regret? So what do you think about this fourth R of relationships and the ability in there? I'm obviously cueing your empathy and curiosity for other people, which is a technique we'll talk about. But what do you think of the fourth R of relationships?
Yeah, it's vital. It's what makes the world go round, really. It gives purpose to a lot of things and a lot of people. And I honestly, as a person who's always been involved in team sports, I've always marveled at people who play individual sports. Like it's hard for me to fathom people who wrestle or people who play tennis. Though I have gotten into golf, and that's certainly an interesting thing. But I've always missed the camaraderie of a team and the relationships that you build. I mean, for me, it's so vital. Like that's part of that's part of healthy competition for me. I think when I compete and I'm by myself, it quickly turns to anger or frustration. When I do it with a team, it's a whole different feeling of competition, a much more healthier feeling, I would say, of competition than when I do it by myself. Being dependent on somebody else and trying to be dependent for someone else definitely changes the mood and the atmosphere for me. It makes it less personal. I'm super competitive, so when it's just me, it gets personal, and then that's when all of it'll come out, man.
Yeah.
I think relationships should absolutely be up there. I think they're vital, obviously, for the health reasons and stuff that we talked about, but I think it gives such a bigger, stronger purpose for an individual to be part of something bigger than themselves that they couldn't do on their own. And having those connections to left and right of them in their pursuit of that makes that experience that much richer, that much more purposeful, that much more I've got some weird words going through rememberful. It creates a stronger memory, a stronger emotional attachment to those when you're going through it with somebody else.
Correct. And we know that if you pick indie flow versus group flow, choose group flow if you can, because you get more and better drugs. And I'm not saying you can't. I'm one that I like to be alone at times, and I get into flow by myself very easily. But you do need a balance. You obviously need other people, and this is a huge growth area for me to prioritize. In addition to that, the reason why I primed you emotionally as a listener, and you, Jake, with that photograph thing, was to talk to you about the life by the numbers. I struggle with where to put this in the sequence, I'll admit, but I think here is what matters, because it gives us a good foundation. Like, okay, this really does matter. And we have to savor these times because they go quick. So Stephen Kotler wrote In Our Country. He's a great author. Obviously, we refer to him. He's kind of the champion of flow now that Csikszentmihalyi has passed on. But he talked about the brutal math. And he used In Our Country, where he learned park ski at 53. So it's peak performance aging. The exercise was about how many times he realistically has left to ski in his life. Okay? And it is brutal math, right? And so the point is that he doesn't have that many. And so he's going to make them count. Life by the numbers in The Good Life is very similar. And I want to read it to you because it'll give you, like I gave you the emotional weight of, remember what it feels like to be 16? Remember what it feels like? I think we forget this as adults, like what that feels like. You got to get into that relationship and feel with them. But I want to talk to you about the brutal numbers, because I feel this with you. I feel this with my parents, and I feel this with a lot of my relationships. Like this one hit me really hard. So the exercise, here it is. Think for a moment about a relationship you have with a person you cherish, but you feel like you don't see nearly enough. And now we're not blaming anybody. People, we move, we get older, we take jobs. Like there's no blame here. Okay. It's just, you wish you saw. Okay. Now think about how often you see that person. Every day, once a month, once a year. Do the math and project how many hours is the key, in a single year you think you spend with this person. Now, this is just facts as of now. Things obviously can change. Write this number down and hang on to it. Now, Bob and Mark, the authors, give their example. For us, Bob and Mark, though we meet up every week by phone and video call, we could see each other in person only for a total of about 2 days, aka 48 hours every year. How does this add up in the coming years? When this book comes out, Bob will be 71 years old. Mark will be 60. Let's be very generous and say we're both around to celebrate Bob's 100th birthday. At 2 days per year for 29 years, That's 58 days that we have left to spend together in our lifetimes. Here's the number. 58 out of 10,585.
Jeez.
I get like,
yeah, that's a sobering number.
It is very sobering. And then they go on to quote that Americans spend 11 hours every day interacting with media. And from age 40 to age 80, that it adds up to 18 years of waking life. For someone who is 18 years old, that's 28 years of life engaging with media before they turn 80. And so the photograph to those numbers, the question becomes, it's not to alarm you. Like, I want to read this. I did underline it. It's to bring clarity to something that goes larger unnoticed. How much time we actually spend time with people we like and love.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, how are you spending time with the people you most care about? And is there a relationship in your life that you would benefit the both of you if you could spend more time together? And then you make adjustments and so on and so forth. But the point of all of that, like we're starting with the fourth R, is you don't have as much time as you think you do.
Mm-hmm.
You're wasting a lot of it that you do have. And we need to be more mindful going forward. And we'll talk about that. Like we have it here. We have exercises, protocols, all the things going forward. So I don't want to start off all somber, but like it's a big deal, I think.
No, I'm glad you touched on time when it comes to relationships, because time is the most valuable resource that we have. And this doesn't get talked about enough. You cannot get more time. You can't buy it, right? And you don't know how much of it you have. It is the most valuable currency that any one human has. And so what are you spending it on is a question that every human being needs to ask. And if you have 80 years and you're spending 28 of it essentially in self-isolation looking at media, nearly half of your life you are choosing to spend your most valuable resource on, I guess, I don't know, we could go into debate, right? There's certainly a lot of, especially now, because media now is a lot of information too, right? So there's a lot of self-improvement. There's a lot that can happen through media, right? But yeah, to put that into context, but then to bring up time in relation to your relationships and really understand what you are investing in those relationships is really an important thing to understand and to think about, like critically think about in your life, to lead to self-improvement, to lead into less regrets, right? And a fuller life of understanding where that commodity is going.
Yeah. And that's a lot of the book. You know, I know Bronnie Ware wrote the top 5 regrets of the dying, and this has that in there. They ask them questions of that. And you can read the book. I'm not going to pull them all up, but they'd ask like people in their 70s days, what do you miss? Like, I wish I didn't work so hard. I wish I had spent more time with my kids, my spouse, my friends. Like, I mean, and they have examples. They change their names, obviously, but they give examples of people who did invest in friendships and those who didn't. And it's very harrowing. It's just heartbreaking. And I'm grateful that we get to, like, there's our good game, grateful that I get to learn that lesson. But, you know, when you have a friend and you haven't called them or they call you and then it kind of slides by for a couple months, you're like, oh, darn it. That really just nails you over the head, because everybody's done that, right? You get busy, you have a life, you have kids, and that's hard as you get older. But I think the word here is being intentional about, we're going to get to your social universe in a second, but like, where do I energy bust John Gordon? There's then, who are my energy vampires? Who are the people I want to spend more time with? This is kind of that curation phase, and we need to constantly scale and curate that as we go forward. And what I want to add here is, because then we'll move on, the feeling of loneliness. So they say a kind of alarm ringing inside the body. At first, its signals may help us. Like, hey, this is a problem. But imagine living in your house with the fire alarm going off all day, every day. And you start to get a sense of what chronic loneliness is doing behind the scenes in our minds and bodies. And I would probably say hearts. So interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's a good transition. Let's talk about the enemies of loneliness. Like, give me like a little good Imagine Dragons. Oh, the misery. Everybody wants to be. Anyways, there you go. The enemies of loneliness. Oh, this is great. This is one of them, and I think it applies to all of our participants, athletes, coaches, and parents in their own way. So, Jake, riff on this. John Martin, the first enemy or bad guy of friendships. Okay, easy trail to fall down, but we have longitudinal data to suggest this is the wrong path to go down. But I think a lot of us fall for it. I'll admit I'm prone to this. Okay. John Martin, not his real name, one of the more professionally successful members of the study, okay, was also one of the least happy. There is one particular feature of John's life that concerns us right now. So he's gotten to the end. He got all the stuff. While John tried hard to make himself happy, he was preoccupied at every stage of his life with himself and what he referred to as his inner drives. Unlike John, this other character, Leo, lived a rich and satisfying life, had 4 daughters. I believe this was the teacher, fondly remembered by friends, colleagues, and students, was very happy or extremely happy. He found his work meaningful. Specifically, why, Jake? Because he took pleasure in the benefit that other people derived from his teaching. It's that kind of concept of like the Dead Sea versus the Sea of Galilee. Like the Sea of Galilee, you know, like it has an opening, but the Dead Sea just keeps everything to itself and it's dead. And so I found this interesting. So let's apply this to athletics. What might this look like for an athlete, coach, and parent? The enemy of friendships is yourself. So if it's all about you, what do you think of that?
I want to talk about me. You want to talk about I.
No, it's a Toby Keith, right?
Yeah.
Well played.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a killer to not only a killer to happiness or friendship or relation, but it can actually infect an entire group. So not just the individual's relationship with the other individuals, but it can be a cancerous thing amongst a whole group that impacts the relationship around other people, like between other people. I think we see this in sports quite often, right? If you have a quote unquote ball hog, or perhaps a kid who's very self-centered, a family that might be very self-centered, that can impact the relationships all the way through. I mean, I've seen those type of relationships impact other parent-kid relationships, right? And just seeing how that's done, and then next thing you know, they spend more time talking about that pair of people, in terms of gossiping, in terms of tearing them down, in terms of, so now you're hurting your own kids' development because you're like, well, yeah, we'll just go home and rip on our teammate. Like, yeah, we need them in some capacity to be successful, but we're going to go home and rip on them all the time. And so that impacts a team. So that's what sticks out to me, how that's such a poisonous thing beyond yourself into multiple different avenues. And it's a tricky line, right? Of self-care versus and self-awareness and betterment of self versus egotistical and self-centeredness. I think there's a line there of caring about yourself, but also caring about yourself so that you have enough to pour out to other people.
Okay.
Right? Knowing what's inside of you that you talked about what I can offer a team or what I bring to a team, right? You need to know what's inside of you. Otherwise,
yeah,
you're pouring out the wrong things and you're not helping anyone. So there's definitely a line there, but it's really a knowledge of self to better help those around you than just a knowledge of self to help yourself.
Yeah. And the point I want to make, you made it earlier in another episode, I can't remember which one it was, or maybe we were just having a side conversation, was about the transfer portal and kids playing on AAU teams and team hopping and things like that. And I know coaches decry this, but I hear this phrase, and coaches are not immune to this from program hopping, is let's just say the phrase out loud. I'm doing what's best for my career. So, and I'm not saying you should be the sacrificial lamb per se, but this is an easy, slippery slope to fall down, and be aware of that. As a parent, it's like, well, I'm just looking out for my kid, and having a bigger perspective on that. So that's one of the enemies of friendship, is just be aware of that, because look at what happened to John. I want to bring it back to the point. He got to the end and he wasn't happy. Like, he did look out for himself. So yeah, go ahead, look out for yourself, but you're going to miss all the stuff along the way because you're so staring in the mirror the whole time that you can't see out into everybody else's world. So I just wanted to hit that point home. Next section. So if you've studied John Wooden before, which if you're following the series, you're probably heard of him, maybe had read some of his books, but he had 2 sets of 3 and the 7-point creed he got from his father, okay, which is very famous. We're not going to go over that, but I want to call 2 of them in the 7-point creed because it's our next sections here. Build a shelter against a rainy day, meaning have faith, basically a foundation. So when the rainy day comes, you have what's called in the book a protective armor or a buffer for hard times. Okay? Same thing with making friendship a fine art. The best time to be a friend, or best time to have a friend is to be a friend, or how to get a friend is to be a friend. But these 2 concepts, build a shelter against a rainy day and make friendship a fine art. And these are now more nitty-gritty practical tools that you can start to think about and use from the book to apply to your context. So let's start with the first one, Jake, which they call the social universe. And this is a visual tool, which I'll pull up on the screen. And we'll just talk about it for a second. And you can do this yourself if you want, but 2 crucial predictors of happiness. Okay, now I understand we're studying friendship, but this is a part of that. Where the frequency and the quality of our contact with other people are the 2 major predictors. So frequency and quality. And that was kind of your point about cake stands. The simple measure of our time spent with others proved quite important because on a day-to-day basis, this measurement was clearly linked with happiness. Who you spend time with directly correlates to your happiness. So let's get into their exercise. And they said you can do your own social universe. So let's pull it up on the screen. I'll talk you through it. I'm going to share my screen and we'll go to the Good Life universe. We're not going to have Jake fill this out, but I want him to be kind of my stand-in as it were. Okay. So you can be Jake. You can be a preacher today. Everybody's a preacher. Preach, baby. So let's start. Where do you start? What you actually do is you say, who's in my life right now? And you would make a list. So you would have a list, let's say, of 1, 2, upwards of, 5 to 10 people, right? Like, who is in your life right now? And you would list that out on a piece of paper. Okay, so we have our 10 people. And these could be family members, romantic partners, close friends. List those. This is not evaluatory right now. List those who affect you from day to day and year to year, good or bad. Okay. Then what you're trying to do is simply think about the quality and the frequency of the contact with the person you have those in those dimensions. So number 1, how that relationship makes you feel, and then how often it happens. So you got to kind of put them in the quadrant. So I'm going to just do this for argument's sake. I'm obviously an excellent drawer without a pen. So let's just take person number 1. Person number 1, I see frequently, but they're depleting to me. Okay. So you would put them on the graph according to their, I got it wrong. Here you go. 1 second. I got to erase that. 1 second. Helps if you have the graph right, Jake. I'm glad I'm not beating myself up. So energizing, frequent, infrequent. So you see them frequently, but they're depleting. So let's get the marker back. That person would go here. Person number 2, they're energizing and I see them frequently. And number 5, I don't see them frequently, but they're super energizing. And person 10, they'd be here. All right. And the point, that was lovely. Thanks for laughing.
Got a little loose there with the 0.
Yeah, I'll get my pen out here, but we haven't gotten to that. So what they talk about, kind of like the energy bus with John Gordon, that was under enthusiasm, is you're asking, are these relationships energizing or depleting? And you can kind of see where people are at. And your goal here is to get this down and to notice. And it's just, remember, a lot of our work in doing this and other things is, where are you at right now? So if you're a 5 with this person, I'll just give you an example. You draw an arrow of where you want it to go. So, oh, I don't see them frequently enough. I want to get over here. You know, maybe I'm not going to see them all the time, but I want to be kind of in that middle range. And we can put numbers on these axes. It doesn't matter. And some people, you know what? Maybe you see them frequently or depleting, and you're like, oh, darn it, I need to get them way over here. So it's just taking stock of those people and saying, +1 better. Why are they in that place? What is the relationship? What is it about that you put them there? Where do you want it to be? And this is a really good way to take stock of where you're at. And I really like that. So super cool. Jake, what do you think about your social universe? Not just yours, but like energizing, depleting, frequent, infrequent. Any takeaways that you would take?
Well, let's take a look at this as a team, right? You're a member of a team. Okay, each one of those team members is different. You have a unique relationship with each one of them. Some are going to be depleting, right? But they're all frequent, and some are energizing. Okay. Well, you can't see them less. Like you have to go to practice, you have to go to games, right? So how do you manage that and get them to a more energizing place? Well, also understanding that people are just made differently, and some personalities they're not going to mesh well. But how do we get to a position where they're not depleting me every time I show up? They're not. It's not a relationship where I have to go to practice and avoid a certain person because he bothers me so much. Right? Having those kind of conversations and thoughts with your child, perhaps, because they'll bring it up like, "Oh, so and so is really bugging me." And if you stay around for practice, you'll notice they'll gravitate around certain people and they'll stay away from certain people. Mm-hmm. In engaging your child and saying, well, I notice you hang around them, and maybe it's because you're school friends, right? And the other ones aren't. Or maybe it's because truly your child doesn't get along with that person. It's starting to explore, okay, someone we don't get along with. We don't have to be best friends, but how do we communicate with them? How do we interact with them? How do we make that more healthy? And then, as coaches, being aware of that relationship dynamic within your team. Who do you notice gravitating towards each other? Who do you notice not gravitating towards each other, right? And almost repelling one another. And then start to think about, well, how can I manage that, right? Also getting the parents on board on this as well. Hey, I've noticed this is a relationship dynamic. Do you have any background on why that might be? Maybe something happened at school, or, how can we figure this out? How can we get them to connect on something instead of avoid one another all the time?
Can we just go to the point? Like, if you're a high school coach and somebody is dating somebody and then they date somebody else on the team, like, that's a big deal. Like, it affects the team. And now I don't want to get into dating in terms of like, how do you manage that? But like, you have to understand, like, that's a big deal. Like, if I looked at 16, 17 years old, like, I mean, those are things matter to kids, right?
Did you have an experience with this by chance?
No, but I've seen it.
Sure.
And it was relentless teasing, like, back and forth. And I would assume traditionally, like, if you have a guys team, girls team, like, it may interact differently. I don't know how that would go. It depends, I guess, how the relationship ended and how the new one started and how long was between those two. Not if you break up in a small town, Jake, but
that's one of the reasons why I don't think I'll ever coach girls. It's just like with guys, if that situation happened and it was noticeable, it was such an issue that was noticeable enough during practice or a game, like, you could really just like, all right, go beat each other up. Just have them go wrestle for about 5 minutes. Like, are we good? Okay, we're good, Larry.
Okay. You might. I would love to hear. So, like, let's not like paint ourselves into a corner. So I'm gonna try and save you here. If you've had like this kind of dynamic, not necessarily dating, but where how have you handled that? Like, I want to know. Like, I had this specific situation between these two players because of this thing. What happened and how'd you deal with? How'd you overcome it? And sometimes these things are catalysts for people becoming friends. Like, they're like, you have to, like, I hate you. Good. I kind of like you now. That kind of thing. Two negatives equal a positive. But what I want to make the point before we move on is they say in the book, it's like, just to be clear, just because you identify a relationship as depleting doesn't mean you cut that person out of your life. If they're on your team, you can't. Right? Or even if it's a coach, you can't get rid of them until the season's end, and nor should you just go get the coach fired necessarily. But it's the identification and how can you move that in the right direction. What would it take? So let's go into that. That was a good segue, Jake. Where segues are just top notch lately. I love this. Is about suggestions and substitutes. So what are some suggestions for your social universe based on the book? Okay. So listen along and tell me what some of your favorites are. I want to start off. I'm kind of jumping around the book, but that's kind of what we get to do when we do this. Is suggestion one is the power of generosity. So relationships are necessarily reciprocal systems, meaning you get what you give. So being generous to the other person, creating that upward spiral. That was suggestion one. Suggestion two is learning new dance steps. So the ability to just do new things together, right? And allow your relationship to grow. Number three, this is a huge one. Another Emerson quote is here too, but radical curiosity. So having a real deep curiosity about what others are experiencing, being interested over interesting. It goes a long way in relationships. Tell me more about that. Tell me more about, you don't ever take anything at face value. That is another suggestion. Some substitutes as we go further along. I got to jump ahead in the book. Thanks for your patience. Is some things that we need to do in terms of what was missing from virtual tools, according to the book. Fight me if you want, fight them. Human touch and physical proximity have emotional, psychological, and even biological effects. So you need to have those social cues, the emotions, the conversational cues, emotional signals, all that has to happen. This is one huge point that we'll touch on how to do this at the end. The physical presence of another human being cannot be duplicated by a machine. There is no substitute for being together. I would love to repeat that like 20 times here, but there is no substitute for being together. That's a big deal. Let's keep going. I got a couple more, and then we'll talk about it before we move on to the I can't wait, the keystones of relationships. But the next one, so some more suggestions from the book. First, think about 1 to 2 relationships in your life and ask yourself, like, what action could I take today to give attention and appreciation to someone who deserves it? And maybe I want to make the point, someone who doesn't deserve it. So if you have a teammate or somebody, it's like, they don't deserve that, but I'm going to be the one to go first and go last, which is going to be a mini episode on that. So how can I make them a little bit better today? Second, consider some changes to your day where you can get in person, right? Set times during the week, the month, the season, the year to be with so-and-so or so-and-sos. And then try and bring curiosity to each moment. Instead of just like, hey, how was your day? Fine. What was the most fun thing today? Why that? What's something surprising? Can you tell me more about that? Because curiosity, they say, is contagious. Mm-hmm. Remember 5-layer bars?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So I really like that turn of phrase, 5-layer friendships. So like you can get 5 layers deep into some, but no, that sounds terrible. Good catch. This is not that kind of show, people. That is what it looks like when you put your foot in your mouth.
Get it all the way in there up to your knee.
Can you save me?
No, I'm watching it. Oh my goodness. There's a 5-layer burrito at Taco Bell. It's pretty good too. We'll talk about 5-layer thing.
I'm pretty positive everybody understands what I mean. Forget you. Jeez.
They did. You could have just kept going. I wouldn't have done anything. I'd been fine. But then you caught yourself and then I lost it.
For the record, I taught middle school. Every innuendo that ever comes up, I can spot from a mile away. Because if I didn't say it, I could hear it when it was. Because kids were masters of working around the edges. So do any of the I got one more 258. Let me go jump to the end of the book. One more suggestion or substitute, including your social universe, is this one. So this talk about 5 layers, Jake, was one of the things was secret sharing. Secret sharing or talking intimately with best friends was how the boys in a study defined a best friend. And they quote, I said, my best friend could just tell me anything and I could tell them anything. Like I always know everything about him or her, you could say. We always chill. Like we don't hide secrets from each other. We tell each other these problems. I could tell him and he won't go and make fun of me for it. So realize the value of that. Friendship's not a to-do list. Like those are good suggestions, right? But the ability that I don't have to hold this all inside and just, boil, at a simmer, and I can let it go. And we're going to get into our next segue of like, how do you do that? But secret sharing, that's super interesting. Like the ability to tell anything.
What I find interesting about that is the idea that they wouldn't make fun of them for saying the secret, because in my experience, it's the exact opposite. Like I felt safe telling people something, knowing that they would make fun of me. But I think there's a sense of, because we all know our faults, it's almost comforting when people make fun of it. Like I don't know. Maybe that's a whole nother stage of friendship. But
which layer is that, Jake?
Right, one of the deepest, darkest ones. But like, you know that I like you. This is what I tell people. You know that when I start making fun of you, that is exactly when you know that I like you. Like we now have trust because I feel like I can say pretty much anything to you and you know that I don't mean it in a mean way or a harsh way. It's just kind of my method of connecting with you, right? And that's how all my friends are. You do something stupid or you tell me something stupid, I'm going to make fun of you. Like 5-layer burritos and 5-layer things are going to come up frequently in this podcast now because of you. I'm not just going to let you walk away from that. And that's okay. I still love you. Okay. So I found that kind of interesting.
And this is why this is why we don't cut that kind of stuff. No, I was just adding to the reciprocal nature of that to say, even before we got on, I didn't even say good morning. I just immediately took a dig at him. And like, it's super early where he's at. And that's when we get to record. And he just laughed it off. And it was great, So I feel karma. I feel like this is karma for digging at you before we recorded.
Yeah. But all these substitutions that you brought up, there's like a reptilian part of our brain, right, that we tend to mirror people.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is when someone treats you some way, they tend to treat you that way back, and vice versa. Right? Somebody does something to you, you have a tendency to do it back to them, and arguably there's a tendency to elevate the level of such activity. Okay. This is why we have things like road rage. It makes me laugh. Well, it does, because otherwise I'd cry. But like, people are like, oh, that person cut me off in traffic, so I zoomed around him and I cut him off. Well, why were you upset that you got cut off? Because it could have caused an accident, because it was dangerous. So then you just put yourself in that position again. Like, there's no logical reason behind this, right? And so humans just have this tendency, really subconsciously, to mirror the things that are done to them. And so my encouragement to you all would be, do the opposite. Do the opposite of what was done to you in those cases when you're feeling frustrated. Like, I'm really frustrated by this person. Stop. Okay, why am I frustrated with this person? And then do the opposite back to them. And it's like, this is why the golden rule is do unto others that you'd want done to you, because we have that tendency to mirror. So it's amazing how it just becomes a wildfire that spreads, that once one person does something, you mirror it and you do it to that person back. You do it to the other people around you. So stop, think, do the opposite.
Yeah. And what I add to top that off is, no matter where that person or people fall on your graph, should not change how you treat them. Now, it should change how often you spend time with them, right? You need healthy boundaries. So I'm not a therapist. I'm not going to play one, but it should not change you as a person and how you try and interact, because that's in your control. So let's move to the keystones of relationships. And this is one of my favorite sections of the book, because I think to apply this to athletics is unbelievably interesting. We talked about team building as relationship building, like the missing pieces of your team. Like when you think of, oh, who can hit, who can throw, like What about who fills these roles on your team? And we just got done with the 2023 MLB deadline. This blows my mind. Like with a GM type attitude or mindset, looking at it like I need a player that provides this, regardless of their performance. That's what I'm going to lead with. But to backtrack a little bit, we're building a shelter against a rainy day. We're making friendship a fine art. So keystones of relationships. We can't confide, these are quotes, in ourselves, romance ourselves, mentor ourselves, or help ourselves move a sofa. We need others to interact and to help us. And we flourish when we provide that same connection and support to others. So I give and I receive. This process of giving and receiving is the foundation of a meaningful life. Okay? When study participants, this is huge, expressed a sense of frustration or dissatisfaction with their social lives, as one of the participants did, it often can be traced to a particular kind of sport that was missing. Okay, so what's your missing score? Now I'm going to show them to you in a moment, but I want to go to the end of the book. Why does this matter? Because when adversity strikes, doesn't matter if you're in athletics or in life, or both, they happen all the time. And it eventually does. It is often our friends who help us through, who buffer us against the wild weather of life. Friends diminish our perception of hardship, making us perceive adverse events as less stressful than we might otherwise see them. And even when we do experience extreme stress, because you're gonna, friends can diminish both the impact of it and the duration. Less stress and better stress management lead to less wear and tear on our bodies. And that's where all those stats come. So I remember alluding to this after one of our other episodes, that you imagine the social and emotional burden people carry with them. And these next strategies or supports or keystones of relationships types are ways you can offload that, right? It's kind of like the fire alarm going off. If you're going for a ruck, I'm a rucker. I throw weight in a backpack and I go. There's a massive difference between if you're doing a mile with 30 pounds, 50 pounds, and 100 pounds. And if you don't think so, go try it. Whereas every step feels heavy versus every step feels light. And this is what we need to get at. So that's my very passionate rant to share my screen. And I want to go over these. I'm not going to define them all, but I want to get Jake's reaction and your reaction as well. So after you, and you can do this to give or to receive, right? So what do you get from other people? Like, where are people on your social universe and what do they provide for you? And or what do you give? So I obviously set up Jake at the beginning of that, and he said the words peace, humor, and hard work. Now we could place that on here, and I'm going to. So Jake, if he was on my team, what is he providing? He said peace. I would say that's under safety and security. Like, it feels fun. I would also agree with that fun relaxation with the humor. And the example of hard work, I would probably put under learning and hard growth. Okay? Now, I want to just be clear, like, if you're on a team, you know, romantic intimacy is not really needed. Okay. Like, that's not a thing. So I'm not going to keep digging myself a hole, but if you're a person, this is a big deal. So before I get to this, I do want to read all these. What are the sources of support in your life? And it's having a portfolio of relationships. If you're in business and you're LeBron, let's say, and you're building out your empire, well, of course, you're going to have different people and different things. So this is the relationship version of that. So if you're listening on the podcast, let's go over these. What are the keystones? Number one is safety and security. Do you have somebody in your life that provides that for you? Number two person is person who gives you learning and growth. You learn from them. They teach you things. They make you better than you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, yesterday. The other one is emotional. Number three is emotional closeness and confiding. Like, you can go tell them what you're feeling, the F word, which we're going to cover. Identity affirmation and shared experiences. Like, you have things in common. You do stuff. We're soccer players. We play soccer. Romantic intimacy obviously is what it is. That's a part of life. Help. So just practical and physical. Hey, who do you call when you do need to move the couch into the basement or out of the basement, or help you rip up your flooring, or, hey, I need this thing or that thing? Like, who do you call for that? And then the one is like, yeah, who do you get together and just hang with and relax? Play Mario Kart, whatever the game is. I don't know. But I like to think of this really interesting. Like the point was when I read that is like when you have frustration, you have a gap. So what gap are you missing? So Jake, I want to leave it open-ended for you, and we're not going to linger here. But have any of these really stood out to you when you were a coach or a player? Like we were missing that. We needed more of that, whether that was in a person or just focusing more time on it. What kind of support did you find in any context?
We needed practical help. It's called talent.
There's the humor for the record. You did not have talent. That's funny.
You know what stands out probably the most is emotional closeness and confiding, in the sense that teams that I've had that are most successful have had that.
Say more. I mean, I get it, but I mean, like, what do you, go further?
There's my most successful teams have cried. They have the biggest emotional responses to both adversity and to successes. I mean, this is going to sound weird because I know both you and I, we love Brad Stevens and we kind of love the emotional stoicism that some of these coaches have. But the most successful teams that I've coached have been emotional roller coasters, for lack of a better way to put it. But it's not like one player causing drama or a couple players causing drama and it's up and down, whatever. It's like the whole team was on a roller coaster together, right? They all were on the roller coaster, as opposed to having lots of teams that, what on earth? Am I supposed to concentrate with that going on in the upper corner?
I don't know. I was trying to draw a relationship roller coaster. I don't know. I was having fun. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So I would say that, and it creates an emotional closeness or bond that isn't always there. And there's, especially when you coach, I would say boys, that is a massive wall, or maybe not, very thick wall to break down.
Yeah.
For them to bond that way.
Yeah. I don't want to linger. I mean, get the book, okay? But think about this. Like this, like if I was you're looking at bringing in a kid to your program, or you're signing a player to long-term extension. Let's just take like a recent player, Trey Turner. Let's say he's in the Philadelphia Phillies, 2023, signs this long-term deal. There's a lot of long-term deals. It would behoove an organization to make sure he has every one of these. Is he solid in his family? Does he have a family? Does he have intimacy? If there's a gap here, it's going to get filled, or they're going to be dissatisfied. If they're dissatisfied, apparently the numbers play out that they're not going to perform as well. And so taking the time to get to know your players, especially if you're going to have this long-term relationship with them, what do they need? Being a friend is sometimes telling them what they don't want to hear, because you love them so much that they're like, hey, I see like you're missing this and I love you and you have a room for growth here. But I was telling Jake about like the MLB trade deadline. Could you imagine checking off? I'm going to stay in my little lane here. Not that one. Okay. We don't have fun and relaxation on this team. Can I give you an example of that? Oh, that was terrible. You remember and I'm going to get rid of the screen now. Do you remember the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with and without Gronk?
Sure. Yeah.
So the year they had him and they won, and the year they didn't have him, and how different of a team that was. Not only the results, but like the atmosphere, just the vibe out of the Bucs. And I think of like, okay, what does my team need going into the deadline? We think like, oh, we need a relief pitcher. We need somebody who can, left-handed bat out in the outfield to platoon with so-and-so. We never think about the relationship of that team. And how do you fill that void? This is massively interesting. Like, I'm just very much intrigued by this. because of the implications and things like that. But you think of like the clubhouse guys like David Ross, or, like what value do they really provide? A lot, actually, because they balance out that missing score. So, and the inverse, like obviously we kind of go to those like goofy jokerish guys, but we could also say like we need somebody who provides learning and growth. Like we need a mentor. And sometimes you obviously play more than one role, but at the same time, like this is a big deal, really big deal. So do you have anything else to add on that portion before I segue to the other enemy of friendship? Because you hit it on the head, the wall that young men put up, because that's where we're going.
Yeah, no, we can move on. I think it was good. It breaks down the whole locker room guy kind of idea. What does that mean? So it's good stuff.
Yeah, I like it. All right, the enemy of friendships part 2. Sing Imagine Dragons in your head if you want, but the book really talked about, so that was like the burdens like people carry and getting support in your life in those different areas. As a coach, that's great. Fill out the portfolio. I know a lot of coaches, spouses, both ways, guy or girl, doesn't matter, have people as rocks in their life. But they talked about coping styles, and it's our patterns of thinking, behaving when stressful events occur. So this is huge. So when we have a stressful event, do we seek help and do we accept help? Or do we turn inward and face challenges in silence? Now, I covered this in the first 2 seconds of flow. Like you go into the thing, it's like post-traumatic growth or PTG or PTSD. Like you choose action or inaction. And what they say in relationships is, do you face away from the difficulty? Like you turn away and you kind of escape? Or do you face toward it and go out and reach out and let it be known? So you bring this issue to light and you say, hey, I need help carrying this burden. Now, it could have been across any of those spectrums. And what I want to illuminate on is they talk in the book about depth indicators. So when you see yourself, I'll speak for me, or your athlete show very strong emotion of any type, that's a depth indicator. There's something more going on there. Like don't immediately react to the thing that happened. Why would the nicest kid on our team pick a fight out of nowhere? Okay, yeah, you could address the fighting, like, hey, we don't fight on this team. Great. What's going on? So the depth indicator, and the word I want to say is the F word, is feelings. Is we talk about feelings on our team. And they talk about that in the middle of the book. And I'll go to it very, very quickly. The F word, feelings. And they say that emotions drive relationships and noticing them matters. Empathy and affection. The people who are more in tuned with their emotions and this depth indicator for a relationship have just better relationships overall. So if a couple or people can cultivate a bedrock of affection and empathy, meaning curiosity and willingness to listen to said person, their bond will be more stable and enduring. So the point of that is run to your feelings. The stronger the feeling, the more curious and willing to listen you need to be, and talk through it. So we need to embrace that F word. So that's the other enemy of friendship, is when every participant in the study that blocked intimacy, like the heartbreaking thing is they had a whole chapter on marriage. And this guy was super happy, but he never wanted to bring up problems. So his wife felt shut out.
Mm-hmm.
And she never got to know him. And he was a great dad and he very jovial, but he just blocked that self off him for reasons, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I get it, like, and we'll talk about whether coaches should be friends with athletes later, and not in this episode, another one, but I find this interesting. So that is the other enemy of friendships besides the other ones that we covered so far. What do you think? Any thoughts?
I think, and this is probably, I'll speak generally instead of gender specific, but we oftentimes as coaches put up guardrails around emotions that are far too strict. Like obviously, yes, we don't want fighting, right? But you can be angry. Like we have a tendency to fear emotion, especially other people's emotion, especially a child's emotion that we're not related to, even if we are related to them, we really do fear people's emotions because we don't know what to do with them, right? They make us feel uncomfortable in a lot of different ways, right? If someone professes their love for you, it makes it, there's an uncomfortable, what do I do with that? Someone's anger, what do I do with someone's sad? They're crying, what do I do? And so that tends to have us put up walls and say, nope, we can't show that emotion. Like, and I see this most prevalent in dads with their sons. Okay. Stop crying. Stop crying. Okay. Or you're fine. Get up. Let's go. And there absolutely is an aspect of toughness there. I'm not disputing that. But you are shutting off that human's ability to show emotion, to deal with emotion, to process through their emotion. And that's not going to allow them to feel safe. It's not going to allow them to feel comfortable. It's really not going to let them grow because they're not fully understanding that you're not letting them fully experience humanity in that way. And it's so big. And so, I have started a practice of just letting emotion go for the kids that I coach. Before I would try to step in and say a joke or whatever to try and get them to laugh or change their emotion to something that I'm more comfortable with, because I'm more comfortable with it, and it doesn't allow them to process. It doesn't allow them to truly build a relationship with you. So when you're seeing a kid cry, don't be like, stop crying, or what's your problem? Like, take the time to say, hey, what's going on? What are you feeling right now? I'm feeling sad because so-and-so's not passing me the ball. Oh, now maybe that feeling to you is preposterous, and perhaps it is. Like, okay, so-and-so just didn't pass you the ball. Why are you crying about it? But saying, okay, you feel this. How do we process? Is sitting here pouting going to fix it going forward? Okay. Or now can we go to solutions? We're feeling what we're feeling, totally fine. How can we move past that feeling, process it, and then move into solutions quickly now? It's much better than just stop crying. It's not that big of a deal. We've just shut them down and you've not given them an avenue to problem solve.
Well, and this is because I want to move into the next point with this. This is a great transition, even though you didn't know it. Is the quote that there's no written word nor spoken plea who can teach our youth what they should be, nor all the books on all the shelves. Wooden said, it's what the teachers are themselves. So who is responsible for what they call having the emotional lattice? Who's more mature should have their emotions together between the parents and the coaches / teachers versus the kids. And what I want to say is there's some parenting advice that was brought up in the book, and then a couple more pieces of advice. So I want to go through these. And then this is in my other research that I did on autotelic athletics. Do you know where growth mindset comes from in emotional regulation? The parents. If you want to see a kid who is emotionally just destroyed and can't handle that because maybe they have a gap on one of those things, it's a learned behavior. And so the emotional laugh, so like some parenting advice that came up, and you can come back to this, is parents and adults do matter in a kid's life. So some things, parents are a protective factor, one of the major sources of protection. So you have athletes that maybe don't come from a good home, and that happens. This is life, right? One of the major sources of protection was the consistent presence of at least one caring adult. You might be that caring adult for that kid. It's like that famous, picture of like the kid needs the program more than the program needs the kid. Understand there's more to the game than the game. There's life. The program might be the only thing, and the people in it who are concerned, available, and emotionally invested in them. That is a massive, massive deal. And they go further in the book that they hold them to standards. And the funny quote that I have to read was this mom of this kid in Boston. His name is Neil, or the made-up name. And they asked him why he thought he stayed out of trouble in the neighborhood when many of his peers did not. And Neil said, I don't run around with dumbbells. His mother wouldn't let him. I just thought that was funny. But the emotional habits are really what we're looking at. The ability to process emotions is a big deal, and having the capacity to do that. And the other parenting advice that came with it before I move and get your feedback was these questions. Like, they did answer these. When should a parent intervene rather than step back? And we could use this as a coach too. What kind of support is best? How do I get what I need from my parents or coach when things are not going well, yet still work towards being a grown-up as I think I should be, right? So like, I want to be independent, but I obviously need support. And they said, well, we kind of do this all or nothing. Like, I must do everything myself, or I can't do anything. And what the book suggests is debunking that flow blocker of all or nothing thinking, and say, what parents really did is sometimes they had to step back, sometimes they had to step in, but here's the key. They never turned away. Sometimes you're going to step in, you get it wrong. Sometimes you're going to step back, you get that wrong. You're like, darn it, I should have done that. But the point was, and they had kids that were from great families that didn't turn out, like they struggled all their lives, is just not turning away. And so it really is, who are you yourself? You have to look in the mirror and train your own emotional regulation. How do I handle? And there's going to be weak spots. And so I agree with that. And the final point I want to make on that before I pass it back to you, because we got a couple of quick segments to do before we wrap up, is no spillover. This is one that's really hard. John Wooden, his wife, Nan, had said that she could never tell how the game went or the practice went that day when he came home. No clue. Could have went great, could have went bad. No spillover from him. That is so hard to do. And so in the book, they talked about the spillover effect that work has on our lives, and is an especially common worry. I want to make a very bold statement, okay? And I'm speaking to myself. If you are a coach or a parent, whether you're at work or you're coaching a team, and your team or your work is consistently and regularly adversely affecting your home life, quit. Run as fast as you can. The coaching is not worth it. Your job is not worth it, because your kids are. This book made very clear, like, there was one particular section where all these dads had done great. They retired early. They had the money, kind of like that one character, but they brought their work home, and it adversely impacted their relationships with their kids. So I want to say, I love coaching. I love sports. Whatever your job is, I know everybody's situation is different, but if you have to choose between a negative or adverse coaching environment in your family, let it go. It's not worth it. At least that's the regret in this book. So no spillovers is the rule. Do not let it spill over. We can get into strategies on that, but know that that's a big deal. And so it really is who you are yourself. If you don't have the capacity to separate those things, it's better to quit while you're ahead. So take that for what it's worth.
It is a skill that can be learned. And I want to make sure I'm not talking out of two sides of our mouth here. A good coach is emotionally invested.
Oh, yeah.
In their team and in their players, right? Now, I would argue you're competitive, obviously, but you're more emotionally invested because you want to see those human beings succeed more so than the actual result of the game. You're wanting those individuals to succeed, and you can absolutely be emotionally involved in that. But it takes emotional intelligence and it takes emotional skill to, once the game ends, the emotion is left there, right? So it's not, don't become emotional during the game so it doesn't affect you afterwards. It's be emotional during the game to an extent. I mean, don't be yelling, hooting, and hollering at kids and referees like a crazy person, right? But celebrate successes and be sad with them and be frustrated with them, absolutely, while the game is going on. Or post-game, allow maybe a buffer. Say, you know what, 30 minutes, for me, I always like it because I would drive home typically after games, and that's kind of my buffer time, right? Of like, okay, process what I need to process, go through what I need to go through. Okay, what do we need to work on? What do I want to say next game, et cetera, et cetera. And then you need to be emotionally able to stop the emotion and start the new emotion of father, of husband, of whatever you're going into next. So it's not to say you can't be emotional about the game. It's just you have to know yourself. Can you turn off that emotion? Can you control your emotion? Can you have that discipline to stop it and then move on with life at a certain point?
when we talk about flow states, we talk a lot about attention residue, meaning we try and, like, when you do flow work, a lot of it's getting rid of distractions, like in being able to dial in on the one thing you need to do. But the one thing they talk about is how long it takes you to come back when your attention goes to something else. When you get disrupted, it's a long time. And as soon as you get knocked out, it's very hard to get knocked back in or get dialed back in. But the thing that I was playing with in my mind was, and I wrote a question mark in the book, was emotional residue. When there's emotion that is attached and it's sticky and it's hard to get out of that and come back, because you get so far afield, you get into the fifth layer of the cake or the bar, and you can't get back to ground zero. And it's just a constant uphill climb. I agree with that. That's so interesting. This is just stuff to work on. You know, I think we'll cover this when we get to emotional skill later in the pyramid, but good stuff, Jake. I had a run in a moment, so we're going to wrap up here pretty quickly. It's what happens when you dial yourself back to back. But I want to go through the last section, and I want to come back to one major point that I really want Jake's feedback on, because it's going to be a mini lesson, but I really want Jake's preacher angle on it. So the metaphor. So to me, what is friendship or relationships like according to the Good Life? Well, they're the point. Like, I mean, that's not much of a metaphor, I guess, or simile. They literally are out of talk. They are the means and ends into itself. They are the point. And there's really no beating around that. The most valuable idea is right in the beginning of the book. They tell you, and not even in the book, it's in the front middle cover. What makes for a good life or a good athletic career or a good coaching career, a fulfilling and satisfying career? It's relationships, it's friendships. It's who you take with you along the way. You know, you won't always remember the ups and downs, you may, but it's who you did them with. And that's really the most valuable idea. And that's what really lasts and what people miss at the end if they didn't get it. Not if you are getting it, like, great, you know, but double down on that. Even if you need this reminder, why are you in coaching? Why are you parenting your kid? You know, why are you in athletics for the first place? Who you get to do it with, right? So lastly, two things I want to challenge people. Do the 5-word challenge like Jake. So I asked Jake, what do you bring to a team? But I would really encourage you to write down those words of what you bring as a friend, or even look at that social universe or the Keystones and take those 5 words, because they asked people in relationships the words, and I'm going to read 2 sets of them to you, one negative, one positive. Can you think of 5 words that describe your relationship with your wife? Now you can apply that to your team, your whatever, your context. This words, just hear these out. Imagine a long-term relationship like this. Comforting, challenging, feisty, pervasive, beautiful. Versus another one. These are literal responses from the study. Tension, distant, dismissive, intolerant, and painful. Be intentional with the words you bring to your relationships. That's a challenge. The other challenge I have for people is routines. So later in the book, they talk about, okay, well, how do you build routines around this? Because you actually do have to make the call. You have to plan the get together. You have to do this. You have to do that. But the one that is very, very important that stood out to me was family dinners. Whether that is at your own household or with your team. There's not a lot better than breaking bread, bring something together. It might be mac and cheese or not, but get together for no other reason than getting together and eating whatever food you can scrounge together, even if it's a peanut butter and jelly. Because doing that and making up something to do is one of the best. Regular contact with the people together. Get-togethers is in person, if you can, is the best. Jake, I want to wrap with this, because this is something that I've been wrestling with, and I don't want the athlete that we're going to talk about think I don't know the athlete, but it's this broader concept that takes a lot of humility that I just don't see a lot of. And this was a lot. So you and I know, maybe you can tell me the exact verse. Love hath no greater, Jake, than what? A friend who, what was the verse? Love hath no greater than a friend who gives his
life
for his friends, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that is the penultimate. So
First John.
Is it?
1 John 3. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, somebody can fact check us, but I want to talk about an end with the ultimate athletic sacrifice, your career. Now I'm going to give two examples of this. Have you seen Mr. Holland's Opus?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now I'm going to give away. It's a great movie, by the way. But this guy never wanted to be a teacher, becomes a teacher, teaches forever, and he never gets to write and be this grand, composer that he thought he was going to be. He sacrificed his career for the kids. And then he learns in the end, like, the kids were what matter. Great movie. Go see it. If you have not seen a great movie. I want to talk about that from an athlete perspective. And I want to use the current example of the day, Damian Lillard. Okay. So Damian Lillard is on the Portland Trailblazers. We've alluded to him like KG. He's very grounded in the community, represents Portland well. Great player. I love Damian Lillard. He has since, because of their lack of moves and draft choices, requested a trade. So I want to talk about this athletic sacrifice. So if love hath no greater than somebody who lays down their life or their career for their friends. What if it's not Damian Lillard's? Like, this would be a sacrifice. I applaud him. Every athlete wants to win, right? They want to get the championship. I want to propose an alternative path. What if it's not his deal to win as the guy in Portland? What if it's his job to sacrifice and be the Dion? Remember the Nuggets? They had like 4 or 5 guys on the bench that were ring chasing. And what if it's his job to be the mentor, where he steps aside, stays with Portland? Now he's 38, 39 years old, let's say, 6 years in the future, 5, 6 years in the future. And they do win a championship. But he sacrificed his best years for the city, for the next player. Who did they draft? I don't even know. It doesn't matter. But he gives his career as to them. And now that's a big ask, right? I understand what that takes. KG didn't do that. I mean, we traded him, for the record. I don't think that was more on us than it was on him. But could you imagine? Because he did come back, right? But imagine if you stay and you slowly take less money, you take a lesser role, and then you do win. And even a coach, like, to sacrifice because I know a coach locally, and I know he's gotten offers, D3, D2, maybe even D1, who knows, who stayed at the community college level because his purpose, his meaning is like, it's not my career. I'm here to invest in these kids. So deliberately sacrificing, obviously I'm using the word life very openly, like not your literal life, but your athletic life for the greater good. This blows my mind. I don't know why. I just can't let go of it. That is so contrarian to what we see in athletics today. And I'm not talking about like blind loyalty at all. I guess there is a point where, it's unhealthy, but I can't imagine an athlete or a coach doing this. So do you have any thoughts on that? I'm going to do a mini lesson on this, but just to illuminate a little bit more and get my thoughts down. But what do you think of sacrificing your career?
Well, first, you got me on the translation, but I know that verse is, there's no greater love than this, for one man to lay down his life for another, which is Jesus' words in John 15.
There we go. Thank you.
The Damian Lillard example is tricky because it's a business. So he may be laying down his career in that case, but the Trailblazers are also sacrificing something at that point too, in the sense that they're paying him salary cap money to be a middling team, not going anywhere, when they could trade him and get X, Y, and Z assets, right? So at that point, he's an asset to the organization that they're almost sacrificing keeping him around. So that makes it a little bit more complicated, but I think there's absolutely truth to your greater ambitions might not actually be what's number one best for, it might not be what's best for the people around you. And if it's not what's best for the people around you, is it really what's best for you? There's a fair argument and question to be asked there, I think. And I think people should ask it. there are certain people that need to make it to the highest level because that's where they can have the best benefit, right? That's what they were geared towards. That's their personality, et cetera, et cetera. And there are some people that are chasing a dream that wasn't meant for them. I think there's absolutely a case to that. And, by them being in places that maybe they're not best for, they're hurting others. And so is that really what's best for them? Is that really what's best for the people around them? No, I don't think it is. It's at that point, it's hurting their reputation and their legacy that they're trying to leave and chasing something that they were never meant to do. So yeah, I think there's definitely an argument there of self-sacrificing a little bit for the benefit of others, and knowing your role and knowing your place, and trying to be the very best that you can within that spot that you are supposed to be in.
Yeah, it's a hard issue for sure. But I mean, you see what you're operating from. It's hard to see because it is sometimes best to leave. Like maybe he is doing the best thing for. I don't doubt his love for Portland. I want to be very clear.
Right.
But this nuance of where you're operating from, because it's hard to see. And like, are you operating for you or are you operating for that? And maybe that is the best thing, where they clear the cap and they get more money, and then they can reinvest that in another place. But that's just an interesting thing to me, is like you're willing to let that go. So anything else on that before I wrap up with a couple quotes?
No, I'm good.
We'll have to talk about that. Last chapter, wrapping up on friendship. All friends have benefits. Just a few quotes that I found amusing. So Emily Dickinson said, "My friends are my estate. Forgive me then the avarice to hoard them." I like that one. The longer one, Ananda, one of the Buddha's principles, said to the Buddha one day, "I've realized that half of the path to the holy life is made of good friendships." "No, Ananda," the Buddha said. "Friends are not half of the holy life. They are all of the holy life." I don't usually get into the Buddha quotes, but that was a good one. Last one is, "Without friends, no one would choose to live." And that was Aristotle. So gratitude to you, Jake. Thanks for hanging through these episodes, and we won't bromance over each other to end each episode, but I do appreciate it. Be sure to like and subscribe. Get The Good Life by Robert Waldinger and Mark Schultz. Get your own takeaways. If you like to play Puzzle the Preacher, see if you can beat Jake. He got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 correct answers. See if you can beat him. But yeah, we covered a whole bunch. Enemies of friendships, the social universe, the keystones of relationships, and the ultimate athletic sacrifice. Lots of good stuff here. We will continue on into our friendship series the rest of this month of August, and we'll get into more nuanced details. So what's coming up is we have Coach and Me, which is Kareem's relationship with Coach Wooden. So that's kind of a player-coach dynamic. Then we have follow that up with Teammates, which is about teammate friendships. And then we'll wrap up at the end with like how to win friends and influence people. So like, a little more just friendship in general. So really good bookends here, like the overarching importance, some good case study examples, and then we'll wrap up with tactical, practical details. So yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. And be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one, I guess. Jake?
Thanks, man. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
See ya.